Yeah. Or if you need to throw, yeah, right.
Haven't seen.
That was a good goal.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You hear us okay?
I do. Remember Sandy, who was friends with, would have been friends with Chelsea. And-
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, about the same age.
Yeah.
Hi, Aaron, can you hear us okay?
Really fun to see everything.
Ready? All right, thanks. I'm going to call this meeting to order. The Community Culture and Environment Advisory Committee meeting for June 6th. I'd like to introduce a new committee member, and that is Matthew Grant, sitting at the end of the table there from UFB, taking the place of Laura, who used to occupy that chair around this table. And I thought we'd just go around, introduce ourselves, and then ask Matthew just to say a few words, just to introduce himself a little more formally to all of us. So starting with there, go clockwise.
Sure. Jason Kenny, I'm one of the community committee members.
Matthew Brown, I'm a community health specialist with Fraser Health.
Ann Penner, member at large. All different.
Chair, Dave Lowen, Councilor Lowen.
Stan Peterson, Abbotsford School Board.
Fran Vanderpool, member at large. Christina Reed from Heritage Abbotsford.
Oh, and Aaron Levy from,
Yeah, I guess I'm at this table with the hard. Oh.
yeah, sorry, Aaron. Didn't want to steal your thunder.
Perfect. Well, it's, would you like me to introduce myself?
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's wonderful to meet all of you. This is one of my first official meetings in Abbotsford. I'm in a new role for me at the University of the Fraser Valley as the Associate Vice President, Community Engagement role. I'm formerly from Simon Fraser University, where I've spent around approximately the last 23 years of my life doing a number of different things there, building some of the enrollment side. I helped establish SFU Surrey campus in Surrey. Also worked in a number of marketing communications roles and sort of director roles within that area, and was the director of community engagement for Simon Fraser University for quite a while. So I'm really happy to be here in Abbotsford and Chilliwack and Mission and other places where UFB has locations and a really great presence, and to be with a university that is really community engaged and not just about traditional scholarships. So my orientation to this work is really about learning about the things that you're doing and seeking opportunities for partnership and that kind of thing. So it's wonderful to meet all of you.
So I understand correctly, you're also a new member of the general community.
I do.
You
Yeah.
moved to where, into Abbotsford or?
So I haven't moved yet. I have four, so a little bit about myself personally. I have four children, all boys, across quite a range of ages. My oldest is just first year university age, but my youngest is in grade 1. We live in North Delta and have for the last 20 years or so. I would like to relocate a little bit and be a little bit closer, be a greater part of the community. Or if we have kids in grade 11 and grade 8 as well. So I just have to kind of make sure that they're taken care of within their communities too. So
Yes, good, thanks.
And of course, the Abbotsford school system is exceptional. So if you were,
Yes. I was gonna say.
Big commercial there.
oh, sorry, did I lose?
All right, then, number 2, adoption of agenda, recommendation that the agenda for today be adopted. And the minutes, oh yes, there's a recommendation, so I need a mover to second it. Matthew, seconded by Christina, all in favor, carried. And then the adoption of minutes for April 3rd. I assume everybody's seen them. If not, you have any questions, comments? I don't expect any. Dangerous question to ask. Moved by Jason, seconded by Fran, all in favor, carried. Good, thanks very much. So we've got 3 important reports today, 2 with recommendation, 1 versus without, and I'm going to call on Thomas Stickman to give us an update on the parks and facilities accessibility study. Welcome. Thomas.
All right. Well, committee, thank you very much for having me here today to share this with you. This presentation was originally prepared for our Accessibility and Equity Committee, and then we thought we would bring it as well to this committee to get a bit of a variety of feedback. There's an opportunity at the end of the presentation just to hear some thoughts from yourselves on what you see as priorities for accessibility improvements across our facilities. So keep that in mind while we're talking about some of the aspects of the study. And yeah, we'd like to hear from you at the end of the presentation. So. Okay, this slide is the agenda of our presentation for today. Jump right into it. So the purpose of the presentation is to update the committee on our Parks and Facilities Accessibility Study project. I want to go through the progress to date and take a look at some scoring from our study assessments, and then talk to the committee a bit about our framework for how we deliver accessibility improvements at our facilities, and then receive some feedback from the committee on accessibility at city facilities. So the city works with the Rick Hansen Foundation on accessibility studies for our facilities. We've been working with them for quite a few years. Rick Hansen Foundation is a leader in accessibility design across Canada. They have over 1,750 of these style of assessments completed since their initiation. The way that the process works is that Rick Hansen Foundation works with third-party accreditors, so consultants. We hire one of those assessors. They come to our facilities, they prepare assessment reports at the facility, and then we submit those to the Rick Hansen Foundation. Rick Hansen Foundation awards an accessibility certification, and the reports that we get from the consultants have lists of recommendations. So then for ongoing improvement, we go through those recommendations and we identify which of them we can turn into projects to proceed with. For a couple different methods that we'll talk about a bit later. So we started working with Rick Hansen Foundation, I believe it was in 2020. We assessed the City Hall building here first. And then in 2022, we did a number of our recreation facilities. Since 2022, the Rick Hansen Foundation has changed their scoring criteria. So last year, we had the Rick Hansen Foundation come back and go through the facilities that they had previously assessed to update to a current assessment with the current criteria. And then we also brought forward a couple other facilities. So the Exhibition Park, which is that map on the right, and the MCA building, which is the auditorium building, which is connected to the City Hall here. When we're looking for facilities to assess, we try and identify facilities that have a high public access component. So lots of community visitors to the sites, and then diverse user groups. That's where we're trying to target our studies. We have a lot of other facilities, that have an operations function or another function that don't get that many guests. And we're sort of saving those facilities for a point in the future when we get to them. So this table here shows the results of the updated studies. So aside from MCA, that last line there, all of these other facilities had been assessed before. Most of them were in 2022. So there's a previous score, which was 2022, and then the 2024 score that you can see in the two columns there. The small increases that you see in some of those scoring, they are for two reasons. One is we do regularly perform small accessibility projects. So we have been making improvements over the last number of years between the assessments. And also because, as I mentioned, the scoring changed with the Rick Hansen Foundation. We actually, in a couple cases, got some additional credit for things that were previously not assessed. Now that they were assessed, we actually were found to meet those criteria. So the accessibility criteria, the scoring system there on that right-hand column, there's two accessibility levels that you can receive. There's accessibility certified and then accessibility certified gold. So accessibility certified, that's 60 to 85%. It's considered a good facility. And accessibility certified gold is an exceptional facility. We don't have any that fall into that category, but all of our facilities in these assessments did make it into the accessibility certified category. So these were the results from the Exhibition Park study, which was a new set of facilities that we studied last year. Again, all of these facilities reached the accessibility certified standard, except for two. Mention them separately. So the Pioneer Barn, the reason it didn't make it was it did not meet the minimum scoring. You can see it's 59% there and 60 is the bottom threshold. The Pioneer Barn is not a public access building. It's a club building for the Antique Farm Machinery Association. I think I'll have to Todd if that's the right name. So that facility is used as basically a barn warehouse space plus mechanic shop for the club. and we don't regularly have the public going through or into that facility, aside from a couple open houses that they have at various times during the year. The other facility on the list that did not make the accessibility certified was the ball pavilion. And that reached the minimum score threshold, but the ball pavilion has a second floor in the building that is not accessible. It only has a staircase to access, so that's why it was not able to meet the certification requirement. Again, the ball pavilion is a part of a rental facility. It's part of the Ball Diamonds, and the pavilion itself is used by officiants for tournaments. So again, it's not really a public accessed space. It's for umpires and coaches to use. So some context. Just wanted to share a little bit with you about what the Rick Hansen Foundation is looking for when they do these assessments at our facilities. Their assessment is broken into these 8 modules, and then each of the 8 modules has criteria within it that you were scored on. So just a few examples here. For vehicle access, what they're looking for is basically your accessible parking. So whether you have accessible parking stalls, whether you have travel aisles assigned beside those stalls, whether you have identified drop-off pickup zones, and then if there's signage and appropriate painting for your stalls. Exterior approach and access is looking at your primary entrance and exit doors, whether they have rest seating nearby, whether they're easily identifiable, and whether there's direct travel paths to those doors. Interior circulation is looking at your interior doors, so weights of the doors, how easy they are to operate, what style of hardware you have on the doors, and then some safety features around stairs, some other features. Interior and services and environment is looking at the style of furniture that you have in the facility, plus a number of different assistive technologies. So I mentioned assistive listening technologies. There's a number of other assistive technologies that can help people with different disabilities. Emergency systems is looking at your fire alarms, the styles of alarm systems and the visual indicators, and then posted evacuation instructions and how you are communicating those instructions to patrons. Wayfinding and signage is looking at the style, the size, the shape of your signage, whether you're using braille or pictographs to communicate those kinds of issues. Sanitary facilities is looking at bathrooms and change rooms. So looking at the style of hardware that you're using, the mounting of your accessories, like your paper towel and soap, use of your handrails, contrasting colors for visual impairment, those kinds of things. And other considerations is a catch-all module that just looks at a number of other different issues that don't fit into any of the main categories. So as I mentioned, with those assessments, the Rick Hansen Foundation goes through, and under each of those modules, they come up with lists of deficiencies. So items that they find that we could improve in those facilities, and they generate lists of recommendations at the ends of the reports. What we have developed is a project framework for how to address these projects and bring them forward to prioritize them. We've got a couple different ways that we do that depending on what we're calling the project size. So by size, it's a combination of the cost and complexity of the project. In this case, a small project, we're saying something low cost, low complexity. We have the ability to prioritize those projects, and through an existing program, we can deliver those projects directly. Medium projects, so high cost, low complexity, or low cost, high complexity, those projects, typically, we are required to bring them forward as a standalone project and apply to the capital plan so that they can be reviewed and improved. And then the large projects, which are high cost, high complexity, those projects typically don't really fit into either method of project delivery. And often we have to look at those projects in the context of redevelopment or future planning. Talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So we have an annual budget of $100,000 in our civic facility accessibility program, and that money is available to us to deal with these small projects. So the recommendations that come out of the reports, we prioritize them, go through them, and then we work down the priority list as time and budget allow us to complete as many of those as we can. A couple examples there, accessible parking improvements at City Hall. So if you came in today, I know parking is a bit of a bear around our campus right now. But if you noticed any of the accessibility stalls, they've got bright new fresh paint and new blade signage identifying them. And we've strategically located a few new stalls as well to get people closer to the facilities. So that's an example of some of the smaller projects that we take on regularly. For the medium-sized projects, we apply to these standalone in our capital plan. So they are reviewed with the rest of the capital plan, and then depending on council's approval, they will go forward or not. An example of this project is one that we've looked at for the MSA Arena. Right now, there is no easy accessible seating to view the ice sheet. People stuck in wheelchairs or other seating arrangements are basically at the board level and they don't really have a good view of the ice surface. So we've looked at creating a platform there. Those are some renderings of it. And we're looking at taking forward that project in an application to our capital plan. And then finally, for large projects, in this case, we're looking at projects basically that don't have an easy way to be addressed through a standalone project. The example I have there on the right is showing, if you recognize it, that's the Centennial Outdoor Pool at Mill Lake. And that red zigzag line is the most direct approach route from the accessible parking in the upper parking lot to the pool. It's got a long travel path, it's down a steep slope. It's awkward, it's a little bit hard to figure out where you're going in order to get down to the change room building. So it's just difficult. The recommendations in the report for the assessment said that you should consider putting parking closer to the clubhouse building, closer maybe down adjacent to it, somewhere where it's more direct for someone to exit a vehicle and get right into the facility. The problem with that is that there is no easy way down to the park, and it's questionable whether there would be a desire to turn a portion of that park into another parking lot. It's a park for a reason. We don't necessarily want to plan a project like that without the greater context of the park being evaluated. So an opportunity like this is something where we would take this, identify that, yeah, there's a deficiency there, access route to the building is not ideal, and we would pass that along to the Parks and Rec Department, who looks at future developments of the Mill Lake site. And hopefully this is something that they can consider in the future when they're looking at redeveloping that site. So next steps, I mentioned that we have the assessments in hand now, and we're going through identifying the recommendations from those assessments, pulling out that list of projects, and then creating a priority list to deal with those small projects. We're planning on continuing to deliver small projects throughout the year from that existing $100,000 approved capital program. And then we're going to start looking at some of the larger, the medium and the larger projects to make sure that we are addressing them one way or the other. We're either applying for them to go into the capital plan, or we're referring them to a planning department that is more capable of working them into future plans for a redevelopment of the site. So as we reach the end here, these are just a couple teaser questions for you to think about. What we're looking for is some feedback from the committee on what accessibility features at facilities have the biggest impact from your perspective. So what have you seen used? What have you used yourself or used with your loved ones? Then maybe some examples of facilities, not necessarily in the city, maybe outside the facility, that are doing accessibility particularly well. Some examples that we can look at when we're considering how to develop our facilities. And then maybe which facilities you'd like us to turn our attention to next, with either with assessments or with actual projects, if you have ideas for that. So if you have any thoughts on that, we'd like to open it to the committee for some feedback.
Thanks, Thomas. Floor is yours. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Go ahead, Jason.
So the assessment was looking specifically at facilities. Does it branch out ever to like the parks realm itself?
The Rick Hansen Foundation focuses on facilities. They did look at the exhibition park. They looked at the site as a whole, but we haven't had them go out to look at just a simple park facility. We've had them always, it's in the context of a building with a surrounding area.
Sure. Yes.
Through the chair, this was the first step. We are going to be looking at issues to see how. One of the challenges that people with disabilities face is the washroom facilities and not adequate. Changes. So that would be an extra based on that.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made in parks in general, along with facilities, but just in terms of accessibility, picnic tables, accessible playgrounds. I know we went through a big effort to remove those old bike baffles. You see those metal kind of baffles at the end of pathways. Use that to slow down people flying down pathways on bikes, but realize it's incredibly hard for folks in wheelchairs and stuff to navigate through those. I'm just curious with new designs that may be coming forward in city, are we striving to hit that 85%? Is that like a goal, or is that really hard to kind of get to that level when you're building a big facility?
That's a bit case by case. Our areas in operations, which is myself, Pardeep, we maintain our existing assets and we provide capital projects to our existing assets, but we don't get involved in development of new facilities to that extent. So our new facilities are usually, they are owned by a certain area. So a Parks and Rec facility comes from the Parks and Rec department. And so they would be probably in a better place to answer a question if it's in regards to a Parks and Rec property development. So I don't know, Todd, if you want to add anything about that.
Through the chair to committee members. So I think up until now, I think it's been something that was extra. We're building new facilities, yeah, let's improve accessibility as well. Now, I think our council has asked us to look at the accessibility as one of the requirement as well. And it started with the accessibility committee. We're basically anything new we do now, if it's building, we look at the accessibility as part of the features of any new asset that we build. Speak.
Thanks. So just briefly, those of the committee members who don't remember me, I'm Todd Stewardson, General Manager of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Just follow up on Thomas's comments. The short answer is we strive to do the best we can from an accessibility standpoint. Sometimes that's a little more layered and nuanced. Sometimes it's fairly straightforward. Doing an arena and allowing for sledge hockey is relatively easy versus some of the considerations on a pool and ensuring that's fully accessible. But we certainly have the outlook of working to achieve that. Maybe just touching on the parks comment earlier, Danielle Pope, our Director of PRC Planning and Business Services, her team is actually working on a parks infrastructure standards package that would include accessibility considerations and subsequent information implementation across the board for all of those kind of what we call smaller amenities, shelters, that type of thing. So that's layered into the default design process.
Through the chair, just a question on like prioritization. For example, going up that the Pioneer Barn sort of might not be, getting a high score on that might not be super impactful, but like, do you have any data on like how many say folks with diverse abilities go to different locations, and how do you prioritize that? Just because that one example of the folks watching the arena, it's like you did lose 2 whole rows of seating to have those 2 extra spots for folks with diverse abilities. So just wondering your prioritization and again, your other example of that big winding down to the Centennial Park. I don't think Centennial Park is as catered to folks with diverse abilities as say MRC that has some of the lifts and that kind of thing. So just in terms of like prioritization. So it's not patchwork of like, oh, we can, because $100,000 isn't very much. Is there a place that you can focus on that people sort of congregate to, or is the idea to do sort of a general?
Yeah, so where we focused on prioritizing, or through the chair to committee, where we focused on prioritization, we depended on the consultant that we worked with to give us some indications on where they thought the priorities were first. And they were looking at use cases. I don't believe we have good specific data on numbers of users that have diverse issues. But they were looking at the proposed use case of the facility and then providing their recommendations on priorities that way. We take their prioritization and we refine it by looking at which of these projects are achievable, which ones are going to cost more or less. So we're trying to sort of add from the operations lens, which of these or how many of these can we get done? How can we get the most of these projects done with the maximizing the resources essentially? So, yeah.
Bertie?
Chair, just to supplement it. So in our city facilities, we don't have statistics on it, but in general, our recreation centers see visitors. And then Mill Lake is another one that sees a lot of visitors. So parks and recreation facilities always see more visitors than like the operations are very few. In addition to that, we also have requests that come in. We track all of our requests. So MSA, MRC, or rec centers, ERC, those have the most amount of requests that come in. This is not accessible. This is not accessible, and we love that feedback because that's how we know that where we need to be. So it's some of it is not tabulated as well as we probably should, but it is anecdotally tabulated in our request for service and request for improvements.
Thanks. Yes, Christina.
Through the chair, then I have just input. I think there are a few places in Abbotsford that do a really amazing job with this. They're not necessarily city facilities, but for example, our bus system is really good. It's really accessible. I know with my family where we're using facilities for neurodivergent people, there are, for example, ARC is their favorite place. Because they can handle the noise levels in the gym and things like that without being uncomfortable. On the not good side is when I'm hearing from our visitors in the park at Trathui House, there's two things. The parking space is lacking. It's really skinny and there's only one on our side of the park. And the people that hang out in the playground, there is no access there's no path from the playground to the public washrooms. And that's been, I think, for a long time, just because people in wheelchair, we get a lot of people in walkers and a lot of people in wheelchairs, and they can't get in and out of their vehicles for starters, but they like using the path, and we get input about, that specifically on our site, but we do get input from the people in the playground because there isn't a trail. And so then they come to us instead and ask to use our bathrooms, and that's fine. It's just one of those things that I notice for that reason is you can't get from there. And if you have a 2-year-old who needs to go to the bathroom urgently, they have to schlep across the grass or leave the park and come back in again. So that makes it difficult. But yeah, I think we've come such a long way in the last just 10 years with this. So I think it's great. Kudos for the good job.
Thank you. And I think some of those concerns ought to be taken care of in the Mill Lake
Yeah, absolutely.
master plan and redevelopment.
Yes.
And some of those we will prioritize at a higher level, like accessibility certainly won't get attention before that some other issues or improvements in the park,
Absolutely.
right?
Right.
I was
100%.
Yes.
They're doing it at 100%.
Okay, there we go. You heard us, crew, two of them. All right, any last comments? I don't want to cut this off prematurely. However, we do have 2 important reports coming up, and I don't want to eat into that time. So, being none.
Good work.
Yeah, good work. Thanks, Thomas. And there's no recommendation, so just thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to 6.2, Abbotsford Forward 2050 Stage 3 Draft Policy and Regulation Report. Ryan Perry is here to present the report. Welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Lowen. Good morning, committee members. Thanks very much for having us today. Our OCP team is really happy to be back on the agenda to connect with you on this project. We were last in front of you in February to present the Stage 2 report, and now we're back with the draft OCP as we are now out in broader community engagement. So it's a great time to connect. I'm here joined with Heather Cower, our Director of Community Planning, and Cyril Tomlinson, another community planner on the team, our small-scale multi-unit housing expert. And I think you mentioned, but I'm Ryan Perry, a Senior Community Planner. So, the presentation today, I'll take you through a very brief update as to where we are in the process. We did circulate the Stage 3 report to you. I know it's a longer report. The report itself is about 65 pages, but we've attached The OCP as it would read with all those changes and the zoning. I didn't expect you to read all that part, but hopefully the 65 pages was a summary for you that was helpful. We will unpack that a bit through this presentation. Not going to try and cover it all, but do my best to touch on the key points. I do want to give you a quick summary of some of the engagement we have going on now. We'd love it if you could reach out into your networks to encourage people to get involved. I'll summarize with next steps and the recommendation. So yeah, just in summary, the purpose today is really to present the stage 3 report and highlight some of the engagement underway. So the official community plan update's well into stage 3 with the draft OCP and zoning bylaw changes marking a fairly significant milestone in the planning process. We're halfway through the final engagement period for the project, connecting with the community to share, discuss, and hear feedback on the draft OCP changes. In early fall, we will report back to council with the engagement findings and outline any recommended refinements or updates based on that engagement. And importantly, in advance of the legislated December 31st provincial deadline, final steps will involve a public hearing, formal bylaw referrals, and council's consideration of bylaw adoption for these changes. It'll be a fairly substantial package, but hopefully we are able to distill it into some bite-sized chunks here. The draft OCP and zoning bylaw changes are summarized in the stage 3 report that was attached to your package. This was presented to council on May 13th, and they did give us the go-ahead to get out in the community and get some feedback on this. As I mentioned, this overview presentation is not intended to cover every aspect of the stage 3 report or proposed changes, but it will take about 15 minutes to highlight some of the more important points. The stage 3 report itself is intended to provide an overview of the draft changes under consideration, serve as a key resource for community engagement, and as an easier way to digest the wide range of changes. It also provides, as I mentioned, the details. Some folks really want to see the details of how these changes would land in a zoning bylaw or land in the OCP, particularly in our development community or those doing infill projects. So it's a lot, but it's been appreciated so far in the process to have those details. The report itself is organized into 4 sections, a summary of the planning process, a reminder of how we're building from the stage 2 new directions that we presented to this committee in February, and then really focusing on the section 3, which is the actual proposed or draft changes that we're now looking for feedback on. And then it summarizes with next steps. So the remaining slides are really going to focus on that section 3 of the report and highlight some of the key changes. I'm going to use the structure of the draft OCP to walk you through the changes. So we're essentially working from the front of the document to the back, starting with the part 1 vision and introduction, which integrates an updated OCP vision that aspires to grow Abbotsford as the cultural and economic hub of the Fraser Valley. This is aligning the vision better with council's strategic plan. The new part of the vision would be the blue text at the bottom. The rest is already in the vision, looking more inward on the city, but that last sentence starts to look at our outward goals as being part of the region. This section also adds a new big idea to support a thriving local economy, elevating the importance of jobs and local economic prosperity as key ingredients of Abbotsford's 25-year growth plan. Through engagement, some respondents did express concern that there was a lack of OCP discussion related to climate change, resiliency, and overall sustainability. And while many elements of the current and draft OCP address this important theme, the OCP could do a better job of connecting the dots for readers. So this new chapter is really intended to help the reader understand how policies within the OCP, both existing and draft new ones, do address the 3 key elements of sustainable growth around climate, energy resilience, housing, and economic prosperity. Part 3 of the draft OCP. This is probably one of the most frequently referenced sections of the official community plan. It plays a significant role in council's consideration of development applications and what we ultimately see built in the community. The draft plan includes several land use related updates addressing our high-level urban structure, one of the key organizing elements of growth, our mixed-use centers, our residential neighborhoods, our employment lands, and our supporting lands. The OCP's urban structure, which I've shown on the map here, is a key component of the OCP. While it's only 1 page, it plays a very important role. It's foundational for guiding the city's growth. It identifies priority areas for increasing housing supply, accommodating population growth, enhancing destinations, and planning for employment, all in consideration of primary transit corridors. The urban structure is built on a hierarchy of mixed-use centers and residential neighborhoods spread across the city, with the high intensity of uses focused in the core and the core of the city and along key transit routes. It sets the foundation for the more detailed OCP land use plan. And building on the successes of the current OCP, the draft includes two proposed changes to the urban structure. The first is it proposes a new a new secondary transit corridor designation along from city center out to High Street, and as well from this Clearbrook Urban Center connecting to the hospital and then into McCallum. So the thicker dark line is our existing primary transit corridor. The thinner blue lines are the new secondary transit corridors. This helps further coordinate priority transit with residential growth areas, major employment centers, and key destinations. The second notable change proposes a new urban center south of Mill Lake on the secondary transit corridor, just north of the hospital and as part of the hospital district. Today, this area is characterized by large lots with low density housing, and given its location, it has the potential to offer more. Designating this area as an urban center would guide the transition of this neighborhood to a mixed-use hub with diverse housing, services, and commercial uses that complement the hospital health campus and Mill Lake Park. This could mean more opportunities for seniors housing, health-related uses, and may help attract healthcare workers with more housing options near the health campus and major amenities. So I like to toggle back and forth between these two because you can see at a very high level, this is the organization, but that leads us to what are those specific land uses on each parcel. So building from that urban structure, the updated draft land use plan gets specific by identifying the land uses envisioned for each property within the city. The aim is to coordinate growth and change in a manner that works towards the big picture objectives of the OCP over the long term. Some designations represent what's there today, whereas others represent what is possible into the future as the city grows. The OCP land use plan plays a key role in shaping staff recommendations and informing council decision-making when development applications and proposals come forward. So each of those colors on the map is associated with one of the following land uses and provides specific direction on things such as the purpose and intent of the designation, the range of permitted uses, maximum building heights, and the supported density or an intensity of development that would be permitted and supported. This OCP update is not a full rewrite of the plan, but rather intended to build on the strengths of the existing plan, but in today's planning context. I'll come back to several of these land uses in upcoming slides as I highlight some of the key changes in the draft. The draft introduces a new look, feel, and naming structure for more specific land use designations, with small-scale multi-unit housing now required as part of OCPs across BC. We had to rethink the arrangement and relationship of uses all the way from our rural areas to our city center. I expect it'll take a bit of time to adjust to some of the name changes and the reordering, but we think in today's context, this will be a bit more intuitive. Just to break this down a bit further, starting with our mixed-use centers, I want to highlight some of those key changes. So what you see lit up here on the screen is isolating that land use plan to just show our mixed-use centers. We have a hierarchy of mixed-use centers that serve as key destinations for shopping, jobs, and housing within the city. This was largely set up in the 2016 OCP, which includes the city center, the center there, which is envisioned as the center of Abbotsford's public, economic, and cultural life, and envisioned as the most intensive area of change within the city. This is followed by 5 urban centers connected to the city center by the primary transit corridor. So that's the U District, McCallum, Historic Downtown, Clearbrook, and now the proposed Mill Lake South area near the hospital. As we move further from that core, we have 2 village centers and 15 neighborhood centers that are envisioned to support the daily needs of neighborhoods and serve as local destinations within walking distance of many residents. So breaking this down a little bit further, when we look at the city center changes, a few of the key changes for that city center area include bumping up the density in the city center slightly to improve the viability of high-rise development and to improve some of the urban design outcomes that are looked for in the plan. This is particularly helpful for some of our small and medium-sized lots within the city center. We also needed to do a minor expansion of the city center residential in light of the provincial transit-oriented area legislation. Shifting to urban centers and historic center, Changes improve the consistency across our 5 urban centers, now using the same designation and name. We had some slight differences in the previous version or the current version of the plan. There's also the opportunity to go higher with buildings in these areas. Currently, they're capped at 6 stories. Introducing density bonusing and being more flexible on height in these urban centers allows new growth to coordinate with those future transit priority areas. There's a few expanded areas around Clearbrook, a couple additional properties added in that urban center, and then this becomes a key land use in that Mill Lake South area. Looking at our historic center, there's no specific changes proposed to the land use designation in this area. So this is the historic core of our downtown where you see it characterized by 3-story buildings. No change to the plan proposed there, but we are proposing to update some of the zoning to better reflect what's desired in the OCP and coordinate that. Looking at village and neighborhood centers, today we have McKee Village and University Village. They're very similar, and one's up by Augustin on the top right of your screen. The other one is in the center of the screen at the bottom. Those are 2 village centers. They are quite similar in what they permit. However, with the draft changes and in follow-up to Council's direction in 2024, the draft proposes 2 changes to McKee Village to add institutional use and to increase the density slightly from 2 to 2.5 FSR. What this does is it creates the same designation essentially for these 2 areas, allowing us to collapse these into a single village center designation. Neighborhood centers, as I mentioned, we have 15 of these. Key updates include increasing the permitted height to 6 stories and bumping the density to help support the viability of these centers and reinvestment. We know 6-story wood frame buildings are quite viable in Abbotsford, and we're hopeful that this helps catalyze some of the change that will help create those walkable centers for each neighborhood. A slight reduction in the size of the West Abbotsford Neighborhood Center in consideration of local context. And the draft includes new guidance for integrating gas and vehicle charging stations in mixed-use centers more broadly. We know these are part of our community, but these are unique areas that require special treatment and consideration when you think about those types of auto-oriented uses. So the plan provides more guidance there. Moving to residential uses, some of the notable changes to the residential designations. We now have renamed what we had previously called Urban 1 Mid-Rise. We're simply calling it apartment. This is our 6-story apartment area. And the draft adds new areas for apartments along key corridors and near mixed-use centers. There's a new policy to open the door for considering apartment and townhouse proposals in the Salton Road Shore Crescent area, just north of Highway 1, taking advantage of that pedestrian and cycling overpass connection to UFV. And there's new policy that enables the consideration of new housing on surplus provincial highway lands as opportunities arise. We know we have the Highway 1 improvements, and there may be opportunities on surplus lands that come out of that ultimate project. So the OCP is thinking forward to that. Shifting to townhouse, which was previously called Urban 2. You'll see in the draft plan highlighted here that there are some new areas for townhouse south of city center, along some select major corridors and in a part of the U district. These new townhouse areas can still build single detached dwellings or small scale multi-unit housing, but it does provide the incentive to think about doing more with the objective of trying to get the housing types that we need as missing middle housing, but also those key corridors. We're trying to recognize all of the things those are trying to do around bike lanes, walking corridors, transit, and to have multiple driveways is less appealing than to have a single driveway for a greater number of units and create that street continuity. Some of the most notable OCP changes relate to small-scale multi-unit housing and the OCP response to recent provincial housing legislation under Bill 44. This legislation requires the city to permit up to 4 units on any lot within the urban area that was zoned for single detached dwellings or duplex when this legislation was introduced. The province also outlines site standards municipalities are expected to consider when updating the OCP and zoning bylaw for this use. So this recent legislation has driven a major rethink of housing policy for large parts of Abbotsford. which are typically characterized today by low-density neighborhoods comprised of single detached dwellings with suites. This part of the OCP work has involved careful consideration of ministry expectations and efforts to find the right balance for Abbotsford's diverse neighborhoods. Through this work, two distinct areas have emerged. One being in the dark orange, closer to the core, where this is being referred to as the SMU 1 area. These has long been envisioned for infill, so lot splits and more intensive, lower density development. And then there's the areas outside of that dark orange, which tend to be further from the core, have less access to walkable areas and services and amenities, and tend to be lower density. So we've looked at them in two different contexts. That said, the small scale draft changes for small scale multi-unit housing, or SMU as it's often called, they build significantly from feedback we've heard in previous stages. Some of the draft changes include introducing stratification options for all areas. So duplex would be possible in all of these neighborhoods. Coordinating underlying zoning with the OCP to make sure that there isn't an onerous process to be able to go forward with these projects, and that we're meeting the legislation. Not requiring a development permit for these projects to proceed. And we also looked at increasing subdivision lot size in the more urban zones in light of the permission to permit more units. So we used to allow quite small infill single detached lots. We know if there's going to be 4 units, that minimum lot size will need to be bigger. But in general, the approach increases flexibility for different housing types as the closer you are to the city core, which is that SMU 1 area. So there are more stratification options in that SMU 1, some in the SMU 2, 3, and 4, but a more gentle infill type approach in the SMU 2, 3, and 4. Outside of our urban area, we did need to think about what implication do all these changes have. There has been some renaming to separate land uses that are within the urban area from those that are outside. Today, we have a number of designations that straddle both the urban area and rural area. So that's a positive change from staff's opinion. We also are looking at employment lands. There is a fair bit of policy in the plan already, but there is room to make some improvements to support more jobs with more population growth. One of those changes is a new gateway commercial land use designation applied to select areas. This would create a bit more commercial opportunity at some of the key gateway locations. It would elevate the design expectations, and it would allow hotels, which are currently limited to 4 stories, to go up to 6 stories in these select locations. Updates also include refinements to the secondary commercial designation, and implementing council's recent commercial truck parking strategy. A new light industrial land use designation and zone is introduced to create new opportunities for commercial vehicle parking, which we know is in demand for our local economy. We've also included policy to permit truck parking on surplus provincial highway lands without requiring an OCP amendment application. So similar to the residential language, we've also wanted to make sure that there's the flexibility for council to consider those proposals if opportunities present themselves when that project is complete. And importantly, expansion of the health campus designation and an increase to the development potential to support this important use. So we have the use in there, but expanding the area slightly and increasing the allowable floor area, we hope will continue to support our growing population. Shifting now to supporting lands, there are some key changes to the the institutional sites, in that we're now opening the opportunity through the draft for non-market housing on place of worship sites, which I believe we talked about last time. There's some new criteria when council is presented with school site proposals to help their decision-making. And we're excited to also have a new and improved OCP Map 8 that identifies general priority areas for future parks in the city that is matched with and considers the land use changes that are also proposed in the draft. Part 4 of the OCP, so that's a lot in land use. I know there's a ton of changes there, and it's a lot to digest. But just as important are our higher level policies. And this is part 4, where it doesn't get specific to an area, but it talks about some of the other goals the city has in the OCP. Highlights of changes here include a new section dedicated to the local economy, strengthened housing policy, new references to micromobility in our transportation system, things such as e-scooters and e-bikes, New policies to support and guide the acquisition of parks, open space, and trails as new development proceeds, and enhance policies related to arts, culture, and heritage. More specifically, new policies related to arts, culture, and heritage linked to the Culture Connect culture strategy, recognize culture as an economic driver, include new language around public and performing arts, new language around opportunities for arts and culture to activate streets and create vibrant urban places. It also includes refined and enhanced references to heritage integration as we move forward and see development either on sites near or on sites with heritage or near heritage. The draft update includes several development permit area updates around our form and character, natural environment development permits, and steep slopes, making sure these are livable places, but also they consider the natural surroundings. And I mentioned zoning changes. To the extent possible, the Stage 3 report includes coordinated draft zoning bylaw updates that are intended to help implement the OCP and improve clarity. This includes several new zones and supporting text amendments with some examples listed here. I think this committee would likely be interested in the last one, which is updates to the C7 Historic Downtown Commercial Zone to add assembly for social and cultural events, creating some more flexibility to use those spaces in the city center, in the historic downtown. We do have that permission in other zones, but it was not permitted in C7 at this time. So I'll use the last few slides to briefly summarize some of the community engagement we have underway. We're out in the community just discussing the plan and hearing feedback. There's a wide range of stakeholders, agencies, governments to talk to, and we are doing that. We're engaging folks in a number of different ways, everything from in-person events to online. We have a number of open houses. We are partway through here. We'd love to see you out at the McCallum Junction parking lot event on Saturday if you're available, or any of the others. We have an online survey that runs until the end of June, reflects the information that's going to be at the open houses and available online. And all the project background information is available there too. We're raising awareness through a lot of the similar ways we've done it in the past: newspaper ads, utility bill flyers, reader boards, posters, really spending a fair bit of time on our social media posts and advertising, recognizing we want to get as many people out and at least be aware of this process and ideally getting their feedback. Next steps for the process involve completing our engagement at the end of June. We'll then report back to council with the findings of that engagement and any recommended adjustments to council, ultimately accompanied by bylaws for their consideration. So with that, it's recommended that the Community Culture and Environment Advisory Committee support the draft OCP and zoning bylaw updates as generally outlined in Appendix A to the report. And really appreciate your time today and would be more than happy to take your questions or hear your feedback on some of the content.
Thanks, Ryan, for taking us through that quick overview. It's amazing the amount of work when I think about it that staff puts into like this. Boggles my mind that is. So I see Aaron's got a question, and Aaron, if we can see your face, that'd be even better as you respond or ask a question. Go for it.
Thanks, Dave. Just specifically, and I know I brought it up in this room before with regards to the OCP conversations. You're talking about the transit corridors, the thick blue lines and the thin blue lines on the map. And when we talk about, I guess, the space between, or the roads, the roadways between historic downtown, the McCallum area, and Marshall Sumas area. I'm thinking like Marshall from Salton, basically, or not Salton, Mackenzie, maybe Abbotsford Road or Abbotsford Way, up to Sumas over to McMillan. And just that whole area, I feel like there's a lot of development there. There are a lot of new projects going up around in that area. And what does it mean when we talk about the transit corridor? I'm not sure if I missed that or if you made reference to it, but does it mean lanes, like roads will be widened, updated, that transit, like the bus route will go through there? What exactly is the upgrade to the transit corridor? Because I just continue to be worried that with all the new people that are going to be moving into these buildings, congestion is already really intense around there. It takes me you know, it used to take me 5 minutes to get from downtown to UFE. Now it takes me 15. And it's only going to get worse when people move in there. So I wonder if there are ways that the plan keeps that in mind.
Yeah, through the chair to the committee member. Thanks for that question. That's a really insightful question. So the primary transit corridor, the thick blue line, and the secondary transit corridors, those are not by any means the only transit corridors. Those are just saying that when we think about coordinating our land use with transportation, those would be the highest priority areas for the best level of service. The routes to the remainder of the city that connect into that would be largely driven by the partnership of the city and BC Transit, but also our transportation and transit master planning, which then we'll consider what is the draft plan trying to achieve, where are the land uses starting to change, and how might service adapt to what those neighborhoods will look like in the future, but thinking about short-term needs, obviously, and long-term needs. So the OCP is really just trying to provide those critical spines, not necessarily say that that's the only place we need to think about transit. So it is beyond that. A good example of how the land use plan does think about transit and that flow exactly that you're talking about, Aaron, is townhouses along arterials. Instead of having driveways all the way along these major roads with no on-street parking where we're trying to do bike lanes and transit routes, if we can start to minimize those curb cuts, interruptions in the bike lanes and the transit routes, the flow of those key routes will hopefully become better. But a lot of that lifting gets done by our transportation and transit master planning in coordination with BC Transit.
So basically identifying, well, what I'm hearing is that to my question is that the OCP's job is to guide, and the guidance goes in that these need to be secondary corridors that are addressed and looked at. Is that correct?
They would, through the chair, the secondary corridors would become the second level of priority as far as serving the community with transit and coordinating that with residential growth. Again, BC Transit plays a huge role in delivering the service with the city, as well as the city's transportation master plan to identify the service levels. But those primary and secondary transit corridors are essentially saying, if we're going to put a huge proportion of our population along these corridors, that needs to be paired with the transit service to support one another. The transit supporting res, the res supporting transit.
Great, thanks.
Thanks very much.
I have a question, I'm Dutch bikes, bike lanes. So one in particular, I'm just curious if it's going to go any further, is the old Yale to McMillan, like that little piece. Is there plans to continue that, or is that just, I drive it daily and I don't see anybody on it because it's so short, like it doesn't go anywhere.
If you don't mind, I'll ask our general manager of engineering to help.
Through the chair, the short answer is yes, there's practical. You build them incrementally as opportunities arise and inline development, so it's capital planning. So sometimes we have bike lanes that are created like the one partial corridor, which is it's widened travel lanes for now, but eventually we'll have that lines of what you see in the transportation master plan. We'll just share that this week, and we put a map, say, updated map. So it's good for you to have a look, see where paths do connect at this time, but it is an ongoing process to get to the ultimate
Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
Yeah, several years ago, council built in, I forget what the budget is, but it's an annual budget for working on bike lanes, that together with any funds, grants that we can get. So it's like we continue to work at building that network. I know a lot of interruptions in the system, but eventually, hopefully, we'll cycle east to west, north to south, seamlessly, safely. Yes, Matthew.
Kind of a comment rather than a question, but yeah, there seems to be like a really big pivot to that the sort of higher density around the hospital. And I think from a health perspective, that's would be really beneficial. A lot of the hospital overruns are overtime staffing. So recruitment and retention is a big issue. And so if there was some, just applaud that higher density closer to the hospital there.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like building neighborhoods and communities. And I mean, you're hitting on an awful lot of the things there that are really important, but I'm just wondering, to build a neighborhood, a community, you need something that connects people, right? And I think schools do that to a large extent. But I think also centers of worship do that, and community service organizations that have shared meals or food banks or whatever. So I'm just wondering how that fits into considerations.
Yes, excellent point through the chair to the committee member. Thank you for the comment. It's part, the OCP does include policy around places of worship. So we do have I think we have 49 within the urban area, places of worship, and then even more outside of the urban area. The plan, while we have all of those sites, the plan still provides the opportunity for new applications to come forward, and there is some criteria in there. That's been in the OCP since 2016, so we're proposing a few little tune-ups for that, but nothing major. So there is that opportunity for places of worship to integrate. The role of places of worship to help with some of the housing needs is definitely something where we think the dual objectives of trying to achieve below market housing and some of the mission of these places of worship. We're excited about that opportunity from a policy perspective, and hopefully that will also create some community and more diversity within each of these neighborhoods.
Because these also provide like a moral compass, and character building with their programs and so on. So yeah, I don't know how much that's city encouraging or whatever. It's something. I live in the historic downtown, and we have many shelter beds and supportive housing there, and it's great. But it seems like that's sort of the area where it's all concentrated, right? And are there places around the city that we can build those kind of supports in so that we're not all in one area?
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Very judging.
Did that, who did that?
$5 fine, my friend.
Is it only 5? We charge 20.
The Rick Kiwanis is obviously richer than Abbotsford Kiwanis.
Yeah, no, thank you for the report. I know the planning folks have been under immense pressure the last year and a half, 2 years to meet this deadline. I recall in some of the earlier language from the province that they were also removing some of the ability for the city to collect funds with some of these development pieces, like DCCs and stuff were being affected. Is there concern or anything planned on how we're going to deal with like infrastructure upgrades that are going to be needed if a whole neighborhood decides to throw fourplexes on instead of single detached homes? And of course, all the other services you would need with that, parks, rec centers, and all that kind of stuff. If we start densifying at that speed, how are we going to be able to keep up with all the infrastructure improvements that are needed?
Yeah, no, excellent point, and something we hear about a lot in our public engagement. I'll maybe start the answer, and maybe I'll ask our general manager of engineering to fill in any gaps that I may miss. The province has changed a number of legislation elements that have changed the tools we have available. We often relied on community amenity contributions, which were somewhat informal, and density bonusing, which was formal. They have shifted that and included a community amenity charge, development cost charges. And I'm looking at Heather because she knows the different components. Yeah. But the whole approach to how we fund amenities and the different services that are needed at the city has shifted somewhat. But to the infrastructure planning side of things, one of the big steps that always has followed our OCPs, and this was started in 2016, is when the OCP has set that land use to then do a review and look at which of our master plans need to be updated to respond to the new land use designations or tuned up to accommodate these new scenarios or these new processes that we need to consider. So that is something we are going to be looking at after this plan as well. Not to say we're waiting. All of those folks are also at the table for this process to help us navigate draft changes. But the real work on their part will start after the OCP to look at water, sewer, transportation infrastructure, and how do we best plan for that in coordination with the land use. Is there anything?
That's the answer.
Okay.
Maybe I could just add to that. So things have shifted in the legislation between DCCs, now ACCs and CACs, all these acronyms. But to your point about things being reduced, in fact, it's almost been the opposite with the development cost charges with the legislation. For example, the previous legislation did not allow the city to collect our portion of interchanges, which is provincial infrastructure, but there's an obligation of the city to participate in that funding. They changed the legislation to enable that to be added. And as part of the DCC update that's going on now, that is contemplated in the DCC update. So in fact, in some ways, the DCC program's gotten more extensive in response to the provincial changes. Good to hear.
Thank you.
Other questions? Well, here's on. Thank you, Ryan. The recommendation is that we, that this committee supports the plan, the draft plan as outlined here today.
So moved.
Thank you, Aaron. Seconded by Christina, sorry. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, committee. Appreciate it.
Now we go to the really important one. Middle Lake. Mark, that's the plan.
I'm glad I'm the headliner today.
Welcome here, Mitchell.
All right. Okay, so I'm here today with Danielle Pope, Director of Parks and Partnerships. I think we got that right, Dan? Okay. My problem is I'm in community planning and work, so I can get a little lost sometimes. But anyways, today, the purpose of my presentation is to present the draft Mill Lake Park Master Plan to you, the committee, for feedback. So we are in stage 3, and we're getting close to completing that of a 4-stage master planning process. So I'll give you a little bit of background from a council perspective. So the last time, well, actually, we just met with them not too long ago, but previous to that, our last stop at council was November 5th, 2024. And here we shared with them the stage 2 preferred concept plan, including the engagement findings. And then subsequent to that, we met with council on April 8th, a regular meeting to share some additional community engagement results regarding the concept. Now we had 10 items that were included in that additional community engagement, and we were seeking clarification around that. And one of those was the boardwalk of mention. And those were submitted to the public for feedback, and we had a lot of feedback from the public. We had over 1,700 submissions, and we received clear public support for these items to be included within the draft of the Lake Park Master Plan for council's consideration. So just to give you a little bit of visual evidence of that support, you can see the kind of the green check marks on the left. Here's the 10 items in the next column. And I'll just provide with you kind of on the lower end of the support, even at a solid 67%, was we've got there it's shown as cultural center, multi-purpose building that's now being renamed as the multi-purpose arts community and culture building. I think I got that right at kind of the bottom end. And then at the top end, you can see would be Centennial Pool. We asked folks about that and maintaining that, and we received the maximum 93% support. So very, very solid. So in between 67 to 93%. So very, very solid support for these items and seeing those in the draft plan. So I'm going to jump into the draft Lake Park Master Plan and just provide an overview of each one of the 8 sections. And yeah, we'll go from there. So the first section, introduction. Here we touch on the plan purpose, what is a master plan, the need for one, and then we finish up with the goals, outcomes, and the project process. Second section, site overview. Here we start off by providing some background around the surrounding context around the park. We detail the park history, and then we review policy context, how it fits in with all of the other, plans. As Ryan was talking about the OCP, how does this work with that? And then we finish up this section with the description of the existing amenities and infrastructure through the site assets and inventory subsection. Next section, site analysis. This really focuses on the physical characteristics of the park. And we get into an analysis of ecosystems and vegetation and wildlife, including species of risk. And that's in our biophysical analysis section. And then the back part of this section focuses on more of like the programming and events, and also some of the key park projects that have been recently completed or kind of more ongoing within the park. Next section, engagement process and outcomes. Here we detail who we engage with and share kind of the process from engagement of stages 1 through 3. And then we have a pretty decent section on some of our takeaways and learnings. And through this project process, we've had a lot of learnings. Section number 5 is our vision, guiding principles, and big moves. So here we detail the vision. We have 4 guiding principles and 7 big moves. And then I'm going to quickly just take the time to share with you the vision. It's not super long, but I think it's quite powerful. Mill Lake Park is the heart of the city of Abbotsford's park system, connecting our diverse population with nature and each other in a park where ecological integrity is prioritized, play and exploration are fostered, and where culture is celebrated. All right, so normally you would see a picture here of the master plan concept, but over the next few slides, I'm going to share with you kind of how that lays out generally, but then you can see on the subset up at the very kind of top right corner there's 3 key areas. And those 3 key areas, I'll provide some highlights within those areas as to what we're proposing through the draft plan. Okay, great, we're back to graphics, good, that's always helpful. Last time we had a little bit of hiccup and I had nothing, so this is good that at least they're showing up here. So for the park generally, what we're looking at here is one of the key things is we're looking to widen the lake loop from 4.5 to 5 meters for all users. Right now it kind of varies between 3 to 5. Widen that and allow people to do what they love, walk around Mill Lake. We're also looking to restore streamside protection enhancement area. So that's got the riparian area around the lake. Redevelop our park frontages to include pedestrian buffered road edges. We're looking to also establish a park entrance hierarchy and enhance our entrances to the park. So they're a little bit more prominent and you kind of tell where you're going and kind of show the park off a little bit more. And then we're also looking to expand the forest canopy by more tree planting. And then lastly, from an environmental perspective, we're looking to develop water cleansing ponds and channels. Now, all of these kind of general park enhancements, what we're looking at here, overall, this will help with our passive recreational use within the park. And then it'll also help with our environmental protection. So over the life of the plan, which is roughly about 20 years. So we can kind of work towards increasing our environmental protection. So jumping to area 1 here, this is the north end of the park. So in between Mill Lake Road and the commercial development to the north. Here we'll be looking to add a city center park entrance and a viewing plaza. And off to the right here, we're looking to add a permanent stage with terrace seating. So it has like an amphitheater type effect. So you can kind of see what that would look like. And that would be for kind of small to moderate size events that could be held there. We're looking to remove the ball diamond in that area in order to be able to create this event area. And we'll be replacing that somewhere else within the community. And that's going to be based on the sport field and sport court strategy to find a home for that. And then the last kind of key piece there is we're looking to retain and replace the boardwalk. So for area number 2, this would be in the southeast corner of the park. And one of the key things here is we're looking to add a second permanent stage. And this largely came out of feedback from stage 2 and the City Culture Connect strategy. So people really value, these cultural kind of type spaces and performance spaces. And so this would be really, working to kind of enable or enhance a lot of the events and performances that are already put on by our community, like Run for Water, Symphony in the Park. So, if you can imagine yourself sitting there listening to Symphony in the Park with that type of a stage, right? That's kind of what hopefully you can kind of feel through that illustration there. We're also looking to add a multi-purpose arts, culture, and community building. Okay, good, I did get that name right. Relocate the horseshoe pits for crime prevention through environmental design reasons. They've had a number of break-ins there, so I'm moving it more to a prominent corner. It's more visible, eyes from the street, and looking to add a 9-hole family-friendly disc golf course kind of through the treat area, so it's not into the open. And so that is what we're looking for area number 2. Area number 3, this is the west side of the park. And here we'd be looking to add an off-leash dog park. That would be in the southwest corner, kind of using a portion of that treat area. Looking to reconfigure the ball diamonds to help out with parking and provide some food service. Looking to retain Centennial Pool. And then we're also looking to expand the spray park and playground area. So for folks. Now the design program, in section 7 of the draft plan, we have a design program that's been included to provide a rationale or explanation of the key elements of the park. Now this section describes the form and function of the park through the 4 key topics, which are environment and landscape, amenities, safety and accessibility, and culture. Now these 4 key topics tie into helping the city achieve the vision for Mill Lake Park Master Plan. Now, the last section of the master plan is our implementation section. And it's the master plan will be implemented in 4 phases over an approximate 20-year time frame. Now, you can see there's 5 kind of small bullets there. So we have kind of a cheater one a little bit. So there is 4 phases, but this will allow for some priority things to move forward under our current 5-year capital plan, and that would be with regards to the Lake Loop. So we can speed up some of the fixes there and get folks up and moving and enjoying their beloved Lake Loop. Now each phase will align with the city's 5-year capital works program. We have a section in there called financial strategy section. Now it's intended to assist with the orderly, predictable, and equitable development of the park, so it can kind of move forward and make sense. And then we have some mechanisms for paying for park improvements, and we can use development cost charges, amenity cost charges, government grants. Those are important to kind of capitalize on, as well as capital reserves. And then the very final subsection of the plan speaks to future investigations, studies, and assessments. We have a list of 17 of them there. And this really largely kind of spun out of a lot of the feedback that we received from the committee the last time we were here. So if you look through that section, there's a lot of environmentally focused investigation studies and assessments. I just have kind of one shown there, an integrated stormwater management plan. So these are key things that will help us to be able to sustainably protect the asset of Mill Lake Park well into the future, and especially over the 20 years of the life of the plan. So our next steps, well, I'll call them kind of current steps too, because right now we're in the middle of our draft plan engagement. So if you've already been on Let's Talk Abbotsford, you'll have seen there's a short questionnaire there to ask people that, hey, what do you think of the vision and direction of the plan is heading? And then there's, places where you can provide a few other comments. So definitely encourage you or your networks or anyone to kind of move forward that way. We've sent an email out to some of our other key stakeholders to help them and guide them towards that, provide a link to that page where they can get involved. There is a little small section there in the project updates. So where you can click on that, it'll take you to various tiles. So you don't have to read through the entire plan, but if you want to just read section 5 or, section 6 about the master plan concept, you can just do that. So that's really critical. We've got there the link to that. So I believe you have a copy of that. And then the last piece is we are using our social media accounts. So we have some social media ads that have gone out on Facebook and Instagram to help folks to realize that and join in on and providing their feedback. And we also have, if you've been out in the park recently, some signs that have a QR code there and can be quickly scanned and take you right there, and you can provide your input as well. So those will be up over the next week. Yeah, so I'd like to just conclude with the recommendation here that the Community Culture and Environment Advisory Committee support the direction of the draft Hill Lake Park Master Plan as presented. And I guess with that, I'll close and for any questions.
I guess to follow up, we should probably have a mover and seconder, and then we have discussion. And seconded. Brand, all in favor? Opposed? All right. Floor is open for any comments or questions. Yes, Jason.
I'm just thinking back to that time we had the presentation in February there. There was a gentleman who did a presentation for us. I forgot his name. I know he's the old radio host in Abbotsford, but lived on Mill Lake and was talking about the lily infestation in that lake. And his concerns, and I think kind of echoed by a few around the table, that if something isn't included in this plan or isn't done going forward, that we could choke out the lake. It just becomes Mill Park at that point, I guess. So I'm just wondering if there was any further work done or some investigation done on that side of things.
Yeah, so how I went through the chair, if I may, to community member Jason Kenny. Essentially, if the section that I mentioned about 8.3 future investigation studies and assessments, we have a list there. And I'll just kind of mention a few things here. So these are some things that are going to come out of the plan that we need to take a look at. The plan's more broad kind of policy based and getting into preliminary kind of design. We'll have detailed design, and we have this list of some future actions that will need to take place that we'll need some of our engineering friends to help out with and things like that. So number one, develop a water quality assessment program. Sorry, that's actually number 6, but that's kind of the first one I would touch on there. Undertake an integrated stormwater management plan for the park. We also have develop management plans and programs to preserve and maintain native vegetation. We have prepare a site-specific invasive plant management plan as well. And conduct an environmental impact assessment, EIF proposed development, identify the master plan, be required to assess potential projects and identify mitigation measures. So we have a lot of these future studies and things that are going to come out of the planning process to address water quality or environmental or vegetation type of concerns. So we definitely realize and recognize that. And so we've included that within that subsection of the plan.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, just as a follow-up to that one, we're talking environmental or landscape kind of design guidelines. And I brought this up in the February one, and I realized this is master plan stage, but just considerations for how the use of that park is going to greatly increase, especially when we're talking about that hospital kind of city center now being built immediately south of the park. And I look at all these kind of passive areas that are being developed and the increased tree canopy and all these terraced areas for seating and whatnot, and they're all showing beautiful lush green grass. And I just worry if there's not specific language in there to consider irrigating those things year round, what that park will actually look like with tens of thousands of more visitors per year kind of treading through there. And I appreciate that that'll probably come out of more the detailed design side of things, but if there's some language in these environmental guidelines or the landscape guidelines of the master plan that maybe highlight the consideration for that.
Okay. No, I think that's a great comment. Thank you.
Maybe if I may make through the chair, just to add in, I just want to make sure committee expectations are reflected in staff's work on this as well. We are regularly chatting with operations about water conservation on that. While we're looking at irrigation, we're also conscious of the fact that striving to be as conservative and practical and thoughtful about water use. So we're striking that balance. I guess what I'm saying in a general way is I can't guarantee every blade of grass is going to be incredibly green. we'll focus on the areas where there's kind of high usage and interest in seating spaces, like some of the performance areas, for example.
Totally, yeah.
Aaron,
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Mitch. Great headlining set. Banter was awesome too. Hard to pull off sometimes. I just threw in the chat earlier and just out of curiosity, you have the list of like the top 10 things that people liked, or I don't know if it was the top 10 things, but it's 10 things people liked, and the percentage that they liked or approved or disapproved. Do you have data about what they like really didn't want to see there? Or do you have off the top of your head even just some ideas of things that really got panned by feedback providers?
If I can through the chair, let me just scroll through my mental Rolodex here. That's in stage 2. And I kind of joined in on stage 2, but I think there was some comment around. That's a good question here.
Maybe I can
just out of curiosity, really.
Yeah, maybe I can just step in through the chair. So a couple of things that wasn't necessarily the top 10 that the community was interested in. It was the key elements that we wanted clarification on, just to make sure we were on very solid footing and including them in the plan. Maybe the summary comment is the items that the community wasn't interested in. We took kind of 3 different forms of that preferred concept up to consultation. We took those things out because there was some, pretty clear lack of interest, disinterest, in some cases opposition to some of the ideas that we put forward and kind of those different streams of concepts. So, I'm certainly not expecting Mitch to have that entire list of things. I don't have it either because there's lots of ideas that we just said like the community doesn't want that. So.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what people don't want, or to know that these elements are not desirable. Okay, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
I might add to that. I recall that there were some members of the public who really wanted to leave that park as passive as possible, and it almost sounded like they wanted to keep the people out of there. But that was not the majority, by no means. Yes, Christina.
Just a quick question that I probably missed it. You probably mentioned it and I probably missed it. When we had, that would have been a stage 2, I think, but we had the 3 different options that we were looking at. There were 2 options for what was happening with Keratin House and Arts Council. Where is that sitting right now? Is Keratin House, I saw it on the drawings on the graphics, so Keratin House is still there, but is Arts Council still in there then?
I couldn't tell if it was the Keratin House based on context.
Yeah. So going back to those 3 options, basically what we heard is that no one really landed on any one of those 3 options.
Right.
There was more things within those options. And so some of those 10 items that, I talked about were some of those key things that we wanted clarification on and wanted to hone in on. And so we received that. Keratin House specifically, people really wanted to see culture and arts within the community. So that will continue to stay in the Arts Council there. And in that south east corner or southeast corner of the park, there'll be kind of the existing homes will come down. And so that area will be utilized between a larger parking lot to help kind of service the multi-purpose arts, culture, and community building, which will further help some of that. As well as, you can park there for Keratin House and other things like that. There'll be a washroom in that multi-purpose building as well. So there's a reordering, going back to your previous kind of comment of where pathways are going and things like that. So definitely will be mindful of those.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure, maybe just 20 seconds of quick education for a new committee member. On an earlier stage, we went through 3 concepts. One was an active, one was a passive, one was balanced. And what we generally heard back was there was elements of interest of each one, but there was no overwhelming community desire to follow any one stream. So this is the culmination of that.
And by the way, just as an aside, the other day walking, my wife and I walked around the park, and I Lakeside Cafe, for lack of a better word, I forget what it's called. I think it's either open or almost open.
That's
And so you can grab a copy there as you walk around the lake. Any other comments or questions? Jason?
Sorry, I'm hogging the floor.
No,
here.
no, you got it.
The only other one that kind of piqued my interest there, and I know it was on some of the concepts, but was the disc golf. And I just wonder with a park of this nature, and again, how busy I think it'll be as that space gets to, is disc golf maybe the best like interface with how many folks will be in that park? When I think of disc golf at parks, I'm thinking ones that are kind of like lesser, the more passive parks that are kind of off on the outskirts of town type thing, not so much right in the city center there.
Okay, if I can through the chair, to committee member Jason here. So with the disc golf, it's a family-friendly 9-hole. And I don't have the graphic here to show you, but it's essentially kind of through the treat area. So it's not to be meant to be in the kind of the open areas, more for recreational type use. So yeah, it would be kind of more contained within that area, within a treat area. And it's not really like an 18-hole tournament style type of course. It's more of a family friendly. So yeah.
What do you mean by family friendly? Like just
So if you're out there, you know, if you're a disc golf player and you have some of your kids that you want to introduce to the game, so it's kind of learning the game and you know, kind of starting off shorter. Yeah, that's correct. So it's not like big, you know, like longer spans, you know, where discs are gonna be flying everywhere. So it's shorter and helping people learn the game to draw more interest into it. So it would take care of some of those aspects you're kind of mentioned.
Yeah, I just envisioned someone firing one of those big frisbees, you know, 100 yards down and drilling someone in the head.
Yeah.
Maybe through the chair, if everyone's familiar with the sport of golf, there are no par fives in this. There's par threes, right?
Yeah.
The pitchman pipe kind of concept on that.
My concern would be you're taking a beautiful area of the park and you're kind of limiting it to a group, because I've been involved in disc sports and, you know, even though there may be only one family, you've got kids like my grandchildren throwing those discs. It's like walking through the middle of a golf course, right? When people are golfing. I'm just kind of restricting a very popular area for one sport. And I'm not walking through there if there's families playing disc golf. So it's just kind of concerned with that sport.
So if I can through the chair, so as I mentioned earlier, it's through a band of kind of treed areas. So it's not really an open grassy area or near playgrounds or things like that. So it is kind of trying to use a space that wouldn't really be used for anything else besides
Like
just
that treat area on Bevan and.
Yeah, I wish I could pull up a map. We don't really have, maybe if I can through the chair afterwards, I have a paper map here. I can show you the outline of where it would be.
Maybe through the chair as a summary comment, the staff, we are very, very mindful of the fact that that's going to be a high-use park. Introducing the activity has to be done in an extremely thoughtful way, so we don't create conflicts on pathways, right? We're also mindful of that increased cycling, right, when it comes to use of the park. So a few of those aspects that we need to plan out in a far more detailed way in that detailed design phase, but are top of mind on some topics, including disc golf.
Christina.
So I have one of those up the street from me. And I walk through with my dog and my kids all the time. It's not really a concern. It's in a treat area and it's the same number. And I'm feeling pretty safe because that area is not high use or anything like that right now. We would get more people using it if we put something there
Yeah,
than if we didn't. So right now, if you go, if you're on a bike, you're not supposed to ride your bike on the boardwalk and all of those things. This proposal is going to be more bike friendly.
If I can through the chair, yes. So when we actually, through the widening of it to the 4.5 to 5 meters, there'll be laning and more directional type of signage and things like that. So it'll definitely be more bike friendly.
Because people do ride their bikes where they're not supposed to ride them. The trickier part is when you have a double stroller or rollerblades. We get rollerblades through and they can't use the boardwalk. So that's why I was wondering.
Yes, yeah, and through the boardwalk, you know, it'll be retained and, you know, it could be widened and, you know, hopefully a little smoother. Obviously, we haven't got into the design of that and that'll be upcoming. But yeah, it would be a little more easier to navigate, a little more accessible, those types of things to allow for, more continuity, easier, ease of use.
Yeah, awesome.
I guess, yes, please.
Thank you. Just a question about Indigenous values and so the land. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how Indigenous communities have consulted and how some of their values, perspectives may be embedded in that.
Yes, if I can through the chair, during the beginning stages of the plan, there was some, which I wasn't part of. So maybe I'll ask my member here on the team with me, Director Danielle Pope, to maybe take on that question.
Good afternoon, committee. Through the chair, this has been a long time coming. We've been in planning stages for about 4 years, which precedes me as well on this project. Through stages 1 and 2, there was large and broad community consultation. Specifically to the nations, we didn't have dedicated consultation. It was just the broad.
And were there specific things that came forward as part of those consultations or?
Nothing specific really rose to the surface through it. We do talk about Indigenous plantings and native plantings, but nothing else specific on that.
Yes.
Through the chair, do you have any plans for some Alchemailan names or anything like that?
If I can, through the chair, there is some talk about within the plan, some opportunity for new signage and things like that, but that would be more of a detail that we would have to get in when we get into that portion of signage and wayfinding through that. But that's a great comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to support that, sorry, and say that it's a conversation that in this room at this committee, but also when we were doing the OCP, this is something that's come up in terms of street naming specifically. Like that's the easiest way that indigenization and Indigenous naming can be incorporated. So just want to really flag that and say this is not the first time it's come up, and which to me just only means that it is important, very important, I think, from the Indigenous side.
Right, thanks, Aaron.
Hey, and just through the chair briefly, and thank you, Aaron, because that's a nice segue into just my comment around that. That's a broader kind of corporate discussion rather than just a Parks, Rec, and Culture discussion. I wouldn't want to do something dramatically different than what Mr. Neal is doing or Mr. Corning's engineering team is doing. So it's kind of broader corporate discussions.
Sorry, in the spirit that I want to communicate is that I think that's amazing that those conversations happen, and I think they should be prioritized as far as they can be. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Aaron, great question. Through the OCP update and our engagement strategy, of course, is speaking with the local First Nations and getting their input on that planning process and some of those things that they may be looking for in the community. So those conversations are happening through the engagement through the OCP.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark.
So back to the Mill Lake Park master plan. Dare I ask the question, how soon after it's adopted we might see activity there in terms of any type of any part of the project's been prioritized as number 1 or 2?
Sure. So maybe I'll jump in on this one, if you don't mind. So again, just for Councilor Lowen's question on that, we have that urgent section that's been newly created in this stage, just to identify some things that we're clearly hearing in the community to take action on sooner rather than later. We've started wrapping our heads around what some of the design pieces on that would look like. There's always kind of financial, budgetary impact on those. So we're working through that information right now to kind of bring something forward, hopefully shortly after, within say kind of weeks, the latest. But it's looking hopefully work and take some action. Optimistically, within 2025, if funds are there for it, just in 2026 on that. So I would just note that some of these things are a little bit weather dependent, things like the pathway. Not good practice to build a pathway in December. Much rather do it in August, even though it's going to be a little bit disruptive. We started to turn our heads to, how that could be achieved while not disrupting the flow of.
Thanks.
Sorry, Councilor, just as a follow-up to your question, I see a 20-year capital plan. Has there ever been talk or desire to expedite that a little bit? I get it's got to be done in kind of 5-year capital segments, but I mean, any consideration to maybe try and shrink it down to 15?
Well, just speaking from my perspective, we've always operated on the assumption that our plans can be advanced if the funding's there. And we have advanced portions of our OCP for that, exactly that way. So optimistically, yeah, it should perhaps happen within 15 years, the 20-year plan, but can't say for certain.
Yeah.
I don't know, but Todd, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, maybe just if I may, I've been involved in a couple of these kind of master plans for large scale parks. I think there's great value to be kind of measured on that. Certainly if resources are available and, community demand is high, some of the kind of earlier pieces, park change over the course of time, right? In response to community changes. So I'd be a little mindful of kind of changing things too much, even with all the resources there, because the needs of the community may be a little bit different in 15 years. We've envisioned 20 years. I'm not going to sit here and tell the community that we've got, everything accurate on what the community is going to look like in 20 years. That's Mr. Neal's area. I'm going to take care of that. So I'm just a little bit conscious of that, of kind of making dramatic changes, being kind of disruptive to the park, and then for that saying, oh, we kind of have to undo some things we just did. So yeah, we are trying to move things forward as fast as we can, right? Knowing, resources are what they are on, but there's also that kind of thoughtful approach.
I might add to that just a moment. We have a fountain in the middle of Mill Lake because of private donors. And we have a policy in place that facilitates that type of donation now. So covered stage and park, I can see we have a strong arts community here. There may be some deep-pocketed individuals say, hey, we want to see that sooner rather than later. Here's the money. So that's a possibility. Yeah.
The other thing I could too, that I also mentioned in that subset of the implementation section, the use of government grants. And, I've noticed there's a number of municipalities that have capitalized on that. And that could, depending on what you're able to access from provincial government, that could speed things up too, right? Because then that's money coming from outside of the city.
What we're saying is it's no longer 20 years.
Sounds good.
Looking forward to our first Taylor Swift concert in the park.
No,
that'll pay for it.
Actually, I should have said the Beatles or the Elvis, but.
All right.
We got a great Beatles cover band in town that plays Berry Beat sometimes.
All right.
The guitarist is playing Jam and Jubilee this year.
Thanks for the ad. All right, any last comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mitchell. That brings us to this our agenda. Unless there's somebody has a burning question they haven't, but they've asked for a motion to adjourn.
Can I make a comment, Dave, or
sure.
for just a brief moment? I'm sorry
Yeah.
for being disruptive here on Zoom or
Yeah,
on WebEx. But I just as an executive on the Abbotsford Arts Council, one of our members recently passed, and they're a person who's literally been involved in the environment, in community, in culture in Abbotsford for decades. She was writing newspaper articles as a senior for the newspaper at UFV for years. Regina Dalton, there was a commemoration for her last week, and so I just wanted to say something here in a space that's appropriate and relevant to her. Because I imagine members of council and staff actually may be familiar with her. And so I just figured I'd take a moment to reflect.
Yes, thank you. You were talking about, oh, Regina Dalton. Oh, Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Regina Dalton. She was a member of the Abbotsford Arts Council. She attended our last AGM. I was surprised to hear about her passing. I wasn't able to make the memorial last week.
Right. I was thinking Kathleen Rake, and I was wondering if she had been involved in.
Oh my, Kathleen Rake as well. I didn't even think about that. No, yeah, that's a couple serious losses for the community. Kathleen's son, Alex, has been involved with Civil Radio for years in the Arts Council.
Okay. All right, thanks for bringing that to our mind, Aaron.
Appreciate the time.
And with that, a call from, yeah, do you have a motion to adjourn? Oh, yeah, Jason, and was seconded, I think, by Ann. All those in favor, we are adjourned. Thanks for your attendance.